Okay, yes.
That's you now, or after you?
Ask now, go ahead.
I'm curious because you read like young adult novels and
Yes.
also like regular adult novels.
Mm-hmm.
Do you set out like, okay, I'm gonna write like a young adult novel, or do you have an idea and you like try to think of like which direction you would go better?
Yeah, usually when I get an idea for a story, it's very organic, and I'm not thinking about what it is at all. I'll get some idea and I'll just start writing, and I'll have no idea whether it's young adults or adults or science fiction or fantasy or whatever the heck it is, and I'll just start writing it. And usually after I've written a nice chunk of it, then I'll know what it is. And because I come from a journalistic background, I have a master's degree in journalism before I did everything in literature. So because of that, a lot of the way I write is very clean and simple because of the journalistic background. And so because of that, that lends itself very nicely to writing for children. So just naturally. So for example, my first novel was Zara the Windseeker, and that's a young adult novel. And when I wrote Zara the Windseeker, I wasn't thinking about writing for kids at all. I just happened to start writing this story about this girl, and she happened to be 13 years old, and I knew I wanted her to go into this jungle full of crazy creatures, you know, so that's how that came about. And so when I finished it, I understood that I had written a young adult novel. And the novels that I had written before, I wrote 6 novels before my first one was published, 6 of them, and all of them were adult novels. And then just out of nowhere, I wrote this young adult one, and that happened to be the first one itself. So yeah, I just don't think about it. I just write whatever comes, and then let the publishers decide what it is. Yeah. Any other questions?
No, bye-bye.
Okay, yes.
I was interested to hear the story that you're sharing about visiting your student and the kind of thought process that's going on as you're writing that prequel. Look forward to reading when it comes out. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about maybe connections or synergies between writing fantasy and speculative fiction and thinking about issues around like an industrial complex and the kind of violence that those systems can enact. And if you see there being possibility in doing kind of imagining alternative futures and alternative realities between fighting resistance,
like finding the links between like the fantastical and our world, basically. Yeah, you're kind of talking about that. Yeah, that's part of how I write. I mean, it's like I can't see writing something that's fantastical or science fictional or whatever. You're gonna hear me say whatever a lot. I just don't have categories at all. But I can't see writing that and having it be completely separate from our world, from the things that are happening in our world. And most of what I write is linked to some kind of issue that has been nagging at me or that I'm interested in, and that I'm interested in exploring, interested in contemplating, be it going down the darker path or going down the path that's more positive. So yeah, I mean that's a standpoint that I write from. When I wrote Who Fears Death, that definitely the many different issues of the world definitely came out in that. But it's not like I sit down and think, oh, I want to explore this issue. I want to make this statement about this when I sit down and write something. Usually, if there's something that comes out, like in Who Fears Death, there's a lot about the plight of African women, in particular, the issue of female genital mutilation, female circumcision. That's something but it wasn't something where I was thinking, let me put this in there, let me have a conversation with this. It just organically came out in the work. So a lot of the issues that I discuss in my work, they're not things that I'm sitting there wanting to, kind of go on a diatribe about and kind of force on the reader. They're just issues that I'm interested in because I'm a very political person, and so they naturally come in. So, and that's one thing I encourage writers to do. I encourage writers to just be thinking people, because when you're a thinking person and you're considering these issues and you want to see changes or if there's something that bothers you, it will naturally come up in your work. And once it comes up, then you go back when you're editing and kind of amp it up a bit. You know, those issues will naturally come when you write it, and then when you go back to edit, you'll see what those issues are, and you'll be like, oh wow, right here I was dealing with this issue. Okay, let me see how I can strengthen that whole thing. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Sorry.
Cool. Yes.
Yes, hi. I appreciate your story. It's really awesome. Both of them. I was just asking a technical end about the revisions. How many revisions do you generally go through? I know writing is rewriting, before the final.
Yeah, I'm huge on revision. Now, I've met writers who can write a whole novel, and when they finish it with that last word, it's done. And they don't have to, I've met people who've done that. It's unheard of to me, but, so it's possible. So, therefore, I always start off by saying there is no one way to do it. There are writers who can, and then those writers tend to edit as they're going, which I do not do that. Not do that. No, for the first draft for me will have so many typos in it that, did you know that Microsoft Word will turn off spell check once you have a certain Oh, I know this very well. And it happens every time I write a novel. At some point, Microsoft Word is like, I can't deal with you right now. And so then you have to go in and spell check it, and then it turns itself back on when there's an adequate number of typos in there. So for me, like I said, I write in a very nonlinear way. So I'll write maybe near the end, and then go write the beginning, and then write the middle, and then go back to the end, and then maybe go to the beginning. I'll jump around a lot until I feel, and I've learned to intuitively know when the story is done, and then I will bring it all together and put it in a linear way. So most of my stories are linear. They tend, except, Lagoon is something else. I don't know what that was. But, I had to get that out of my system. But I tend to write very linear. My stories are linear, but the way I write them is very non-linear. So I'll bring it all together, and then I'll edit. So first I have to spell check the thing, which usually takes me like 3 days to spell check the whole document, and 3 days of like meticulously using the spell checker. This isn't even reading it. This is just getting rid of the typos. So I do that, and then of course I'll bring it all together and read it over and over. And so I do a lot of editing, a lot. Like, I don't know if I do more than most writers, but I feel like I do a lot. I think I edited Who Fears Death over 40 times. And Who Fears Death started off being 700 pages. There was a book 1 and a book 2, and my agent looked at this thing after he read it, and he's like, this is great, I love this, but 1, you're writing something very unique. This is African science fiction, which is rarely done, and you have a book 1 and book 2. You need to bring this thing together. This is what he told me. He said, you need to keep the exact story that you have, but bring it from 700 pages down to closer to 300, without changing anything. And it took me 2 years to do. He showed me this thing where it's like, I'd already edited the thing many times by then. And then he showed me this technique where I would go through the whole manuscript, like with a very, very fine-tooth comb, and look at every single word and take out anything that did not need to be there. Like anything that did not need to be there. And so that took me 2 years. And then also he had me take out all the inner thoughts. And one thing I've learned after doing that process is I can't stand inner thoughts. Like when you have a character thinking, ooh, just thinking to themselves, I can't stand inner thoughts. And I realized that 9 times out of 10, inner thoughts are unnecessary because you can know all that by context. So I took all that out, took me 2 years, and then by then, when I read the manuscript, it read really fast and smooth because there was nothing there that didn't need to be there. So yeah, I'm very big with editing, and over and over and over again. When I say editing, I mean go through the whole entire manuscript tediously and do whatever I need to do. It could be structural, it could be grammatical, it could be for tone, like for the Book of Phoenix. That needed to sound like she was speaking the story, but it was still a novel, so it's not exactly like speaking. And I went there, I did a full edit where I was listening to how she would how she would say the story. So many edits. And then also one technique I'd like to also share with writers is that I have, well, it's not an advertisement for Kindle, but it's going to sound like one. You can send your manuscript to, and I don't know if other e-readers have this, but you can send your manuscript to your Kindle so you can read it on there. But Kindle has a really good text-to-speech application where it can read it out loud. And so I've added a full edit where I have my Kindle next to me, and then I have the manuscript on my computer, and I have the Kindle read it out loud to me as I'm editing. So I can listen to it and look at it at the same time. And that's one of the ways where I found a lot of, I've been able to smooth out my manuscript a lot more. So that's one full edit as well. So yeah, a lot of editing and reading it over. And also another technique with editing, after you've read something many times and you want it to seem new when you have to read it again, you just change the font. It works. It works. It's all about tricking your brain. It works. This is for people who just have to edit a lot, and I'm definitely one of those people. Yeah.
Just because I'm Canadian, and it's just normal for Canadians to read both with the British spelling and the American spelling. You were talking about Microsoft and spell check. Does Nigeria use the British spelling, and if so, what do you use?
Yeah, it does, but I typically use the American spelling because usually I go with where it's first published, and it's for my publisher, and so depending on where it's published, they change things, like like Lagoon, the American edition of Lagoon is coming out this year, so this is the British edition of it, and the spellings, the spelling, and then the way that the date is put, there's just little things that are different, and so I'm willing to do the work of whatever, the translating part of it. But I know like Harry Potter, for example, has multiple. It has like a British version and an American version, and it's not just the spellings of words, it's like just certain specifics where it's almost a translation. I don't like that. I like there to be one way that the book should be. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Have you books that have been published anywhere in Africa?
Yes. Let's see. Akata Witch has been published in Nigeria, but with a different title, because the phrase the phrase Akata Witch is very problematic in Nigeria. Very. Like, first of all, the word Akata is a derogatory term for African Americans. It's so offensive. That's why I wanted to put it in the title. I wanted to be the first to do that, and I did it. So that's in the title, but you can't, like, if they publish that in Nigeria, people would just go mad. So they needed to change that word, and then also the word witch. The idea of witches in Nigeria has a very negative, terrifying, problematic connotation, and if it was in the cover, if it was on the cover and put out there, especially for a young adult book, parents would not buy that for their kids. They think it was pushing on like demonic and satanic witchcraft onto their kids. So they had to change the title to What Sunny Saw in the Flames. So, and that's actually been very well received in Nigeria, which is really encouraging to me, because at first they were very nervous about because Akata Witch has a lot of juju and Nigerian magic in there, and those have some problematic stigmas as well. But it's been very well received. And then my first novel, Zara the Windseeker, was also published in Nigeria, and that was the one that was very, very well received. And I remember people saying that since the category of science fiction and fantasy does not exist over there, well, it will eventually. It's starting to now, but at the time when it was published there, which was in 2008, nobody knew what to make of it over there. They're very confused by it, and I remember people kept describing it as a book of fairy tales. I'm like, no, it's not. It's nothing like a book of fairy tales, but they had no terminology for what I was writing. But it was very well received. It was so well received there that it won a really big award, the Wole Soyinka Prize for Literature, which is a prize not just for young adult literature, but just literature in general. And so that was really a big deal for me because of what I was writing and the fact that it introduced a specific type of writing to Nigeria. So very well received. They're supposed to publish Lagoon in Nigeria probably in the next year or two, and I'm very curious to see how that will be received because Lagoon is full of a lot of factual stuff. We'll just put it that way. There are things in there, for example, in my reading, Adora's father was killed in a car accident on the Lagos-Benin Expressway where the thieves made everybody lie down in the road, and then the truck came around and ran everybody over. That really happened. There are many things in Lagoon that really happened that are just, they're fact. So when this is published in Nigeria, I'm just glad that I visited in November because I have a feeling it's going to cause it's going to make some waves. So yeah, I have stuff that are published there. I've had, most of my novels are published in South Africa. They're not published in Egypt and Nairobi, but they've been found there. So, you know, things are kind of trickling in other ways as well. Yeah?
How long does it generally take you to write a book, to finish the manuscript?
On average, like I said, I know writers that can write a book a year. They do it. I don't know how they do it, but they do it, and it's very good. For me, on average, it's taken about 4 years on average. Some take longer than others. Who Fears Death took me 6 years. Lagoon took me 3 or 4 years. The Book of Phoenix took me, let me see, about 3 years. I'm trying to get faster, but sometimes the process is like, it's not a matter of sitting down and writing it. I have to wait. You know, you have to wait and just let it marinate a little bit. So yeah, on average about 4 years. Yeah.
Did winning the World Fantasy Award make a difference in your career?
Very much so. It definitely made a really big difference. I think that it kind of, it introduced me to a lot of readers who had not read my work, but it also, I think, opened up just a path for a different type of fantasy for people to kind of take in, because Who Fears Death is very much what it is. It's still dealing with a lot of African issues, you know, and it's within the whole genre of fantasy and science, whatever it is. And I think it opened up the doors for that type of writing. Yeah.
What are your favorite sci-fi, fantasy, whatever? Who do you draw on, or who do you
Let's see. I have a lot of favorites. I read a lot. Let me see. Who are my favorites though? Well, I think one of my favorites, of course, is Octavia Butler. Remains Octavia Butler. It's not because she's a black science fiction writer. It's not it. You know, it sounds that way, but it's not. I love the way she writes. I love the way she tells a story. I love the way that she writes accessible science fiction. I've had a lot of issues with the way a lot of science fiction has been written, especially in the past. And to me, it was not accessible at all for multiple reasons. And the way that she writes it was just totally opened things up for me. I think, let's see, other. It'd have to be. I'm a fan of Nell Hopkins as well, but Salman Rushdie is another one. But I don't know what he is either. He is what he is. Gosh. I have a lot of favorites. You know, I have a lot of favorites. I can go down the list, but yeah, those are 2 of my favorites. Yes.
Do you write full time or?
That's a tricky question. Do I write full time? Well, I'm a full-time professor, but yes, I write full time. Does that make sense?
Right.
I just do it. I just do it. But yeah, I'm a full-time full-time professor. I teach at the University of Buffalo. But I'm one of those people who, even when I was working on my PhD, I think I wrote 3 novels while I was working on my PhD and suffering that. But it's writing is something that I enjoy, and writing is something that, writing and reading, because while I was working on my PhD, I was reading, 3 books at the same time for classes and for my own research, but then I'd always be reading one pleasure book at the same time. So I'm the same way with writing. I write all the time. And when I'm not writing, I'm writing, if that makes sense too, because the writing isn't always a sitting down and typing or physically writing part. Sometimes it's just, there are times where people think, like people who aren't writers, they think that writers are wasting their time or just like just slacking off. But, well, we might be just sitting down and just thinking or just sitting there. And that's part of the writing, where you're just sitting there and you're just letting your brain do whatever you're doing. And I do that all the time. So yeah, I write all the time, yeah. I would definitely consider myself a full-time writer, especially when I look at the amount that I produce, despite the fact that I do a lot of other things at the same time. Yeah.
Are you doing that right now?
Yes, yes! What am I writing right now? Oh, it's a secret. It's a secret. But I am. Travel does things for me. Travel does things to my brain and it pokes my muse. And I just did a lot of traveling. I just was in a completely different part of the world, completely different everything. And I did like a talk there. I was there for the Arabic language symposium, and I was the only English speaker there who only spoke English. And I just did a completely different everything, and I know how that's going to feed what I'm writing. So yeah, very much. Even now, yes, the wheels are turning. I just need to, yeah. Yeah.
You do one book at a time?
Usually, yes. I prefer that. I prefer to do one book at a time because when I'm working on something, I'm working on that thing. But like lately, I've had multiple, not books, projects where the stories are in different forms, not just books. They might be short stories, they might be film related, and so I've had to work on all there's a time where, 2 weeks ago where I had to work on 3 different narratives at the same time. I didn't like it, but it was only because I had to. But I prefer to do one book at a time, because when I'm in that book, I'm in that book. And for a while, there were three books where I was waiting for my editors to get back to me with editorial notes. 3 books. And I lived in dread for several months, thinking they were all going to get back to me at the same time. Oh, and unfortunately 2 of them did. But I can only do one at a time. Because when I'm in that world, I'm in that world. When I'm with those characters, I'm with those characters. So what I ended up doing was I work on that one thing, and then when I'm done with that, then I work on the next thing. Just keep everything. I like to keep everything separate as much as possible. Yeah.
You said you wrote 6 novels before your first one sold. Are you going to pull those up as a publisher or fix them or?
I think there's only one that I feel. There's one that I've written, but I've mined so many short stories from it. I've mined like 6 or 7, and they've all been published. And I think that's the one that I feel is good enough to be. It was actually, I put it out. My agent had shopped it around a bit, and I think it was just before its time, because several editors read it, loved it, but they were like, we don't know what this is, and they said, is this fantasy or is this a literary novel? Because this is too literary for fantasy, and this is too fantastical for being literary. It was really annoying. You know, it was one of those problems you can't fix. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? And so, so I ended up putting that aside. I had another novel, which I had a similar issue when my agent shopped it around. It almost sold 4 times to major publishers, and the reasons were, it was the same reason, and this is probably because it was a little ahead of its time too. And the reason was they couldn't figure out whether the main character was American or Nigerian. I said, because we don't know if this character is American or Nigerian, we don't know how to market it. So therefore, we're going to pass on it. So that happened with that. So, but the other novels I feel were more just practice. You know, they were just me getting things out of my system, me learning how to write a novel. And so I often tell people that, you know, the first novel that you write may not be the first one that gets published, and that's perfectly fine, because a lot of times you have to figure things out and learn how to learn the process. And for me, I loved writing anyway, so I was just writing these things, and then I would just go on to the next one and go on to the next one. It wasn't really an issue for me, because I love just the process of putting together a story and then seeing it become what it is. And I think, yeah, maybe 3 out of those ones I would never want anyone else to see. And just, no. Those are just going to be mine. But in one of those that I never want anyone to see was the beginning of the world that Zara the Windseeker took place in. So by the time I wrote Zara the Windseeker, I knew that world really well. So I did all my world building with that novel. So I didn't have to write anything. Like I didn't have to write like a sketch of this world and profiles and all that. I already knew it in my head by the time I wrote Zara the Windseeker. So maybe that one was more like a part of the process of writing Zara the Windseeker. Yeah.
What do you teach?
I teach creative writing and literature. And this semester, I'm teaching a science fiction class, which is awesome. It's very awesome. And then I'm also teaching an advanced creative writing workshop, which I love teaching the workshops. I make them work hard. And I make them compete with each other, too. It's always fun. Yes.
What books are in your curriculum for the science fiction course?
Let me see. Okay.
Dying to know.
Okay, Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. That's one of them. And I like to have a very eclectic mix. So, Ray Bradbury, I'm really tired. So, Ray Bradbury's book burning book. Fahrenheit 451. Fahrenheit 451. We Three, which is a graphic novel that I love, and I think everyone should read it. It's an amazing piece of work. I had Why the Last Man on there, The Leftovers. Last semester I had Lagoon along with Things Fall Apart. And I was teaching Things Fall Apart as an alien invasion novel. So Things Fall Apart is a very quintessential African novel about this Nigerian Igbo community where the missionaries, the European missionaries come in and things fall apart. So yeah, teaching that as an alien invasion narrative, or taught that as an alien invasion narrative. Last semester, did I mention The Leftovers? Okay, The Leftovers, it's on there. What else? I said Why the Last Man. Those are some of them. If I remember more, I can give you that. Yeah. Any other?
It seems almost out of place in this environment.
Yeah, The Leftovers I put on there because I wanted something that had a magical realist feel. Something that's right on the border. That is hard to categorize. So yeah, that one's a new one. I wish I could remember more, but my brain is just. And then Ursula Le Guin's the ones who walk away from Omelas. That's always a really good story to teach in a science fiction class because it really shows a type of speculative fiction that brings forth a message, but does it in a way that's almost endemic to speculative fiction. Yeah, that's one that I really like. And then also the short story Something Passed By Robert McCann, because it's really weird. That's a good one to start the class off with. It's short, it's online, and so you don't have to worry about any of your students being like, I haven't gotten a book yet. That one's online. Always, and The Giver is another one that I like to put on there too. For the, I like to have one young adult narrative on it. I think The Giver's always good. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.